30 years ago.
What if you bringing that beer back, it ends up in the hands of the person who created it, and that's how they create it, is they got it from you.
Transparent aluminum.
Welcome to the edge of nowhere. Monster Lore Tour Podcast. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this 44th episode of the Monster Lore Tour Paranormal Deep Dives from the Edge of Nowhere podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Carr, here along with my co-host and the alien versus my predator, Mr. Matt Ozero, a.k.a. the Moz. How we doing today, Moz?
So adversarial role today.
Ooh, dun dun dun.
Yeah. Nice.
But first, before we get into all this, you have a couple things for old business, I believe, Moz.
Yeah, I want to do the Sigourney to my Weaver. That's what I was thinking.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm going to write that down for later.
Yep. No, I had real old business. So old. No, just really quick, we did the Wear Crocodile thing. I kind of thought when we did some questions for you, you were going to go more deep into the ontological and trying to tease out some of those really deep concepts that Johannes Mertz was talking about. We did not do that. So we might circle back to... No, I just think we might circle back at some point because I don't understand 100% of that 300-page study myself. And
yeah, there was a lot in there.
It was a lot in there, and I think we're going to be circling back because I think it's important.
Sure, that's always a lot.
I think we're going to, solve this whole shapeshifter dealio, and this might be an important piece of it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're always allowed to circle back. We update our stuff a lot, so yeah. And, season 2 is coming.
Yeah, we also circle the drain. We circle a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clockwise, though. Clockwise.
Oh, this isn't an Australian podcast.
The Crocs were counterclockwise last episode.
Yes.
This episode, we're back to clockwise.
Exactly. Which I don't know which is good or bad. Like sacred, a lot of times you go the other way, and sometimes it's...
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't
know. Any way you flush, really.
No matter where you go, there you are.
There you are. The one is there was a mention of made one kind of comment about Pangea because we found Wear Crocs in South America and Wear Crocs in Africa.
Right.
So we made like a comment about when, and you were going to look into when Pangea got torn apart.
I found it started splitting up about 180 million years ago.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that lines up with your fossil record and stuff, though, as far as how far back those guys go.
Well, crocodiles go back pretty much the same for 200 million years.
Oh, I guess that's true, yeah.
So they were on either side of that continent. And
yep, so they would have been on Pangea to get split up as it split up.
Yeah. It's pretty weird.
Interesting.
And the time actually, that actually the fossil record coincides with our craziness. Who knew?
So the rocks and the Crocs and the shaman and all that, you think that goes all the way back to Pangea then?
I have no idea, but I think our consciousness has to be part of this somehow. So in some ways, I don't know if it goes beyond. I mean, certainly something goes back beyond that, but what was it perceived at before we got to a certain level of consciousness? That is something I do not know off the top of my head.
You were right. We're definitely going to have to circle back around to that.
Yep. Counterclockwise.
Counterclockwise. That's a bit heavy for old business, so we're going to let that lay. That's a little teaser for later, I guess.
Yeah.
We're going to try to figure this stuff out as we go here, right, Moz?
We're going to solve it. We've done a lot season 1 already, and we're going to just solve stuff. That's what we decided. We're just make shit up.
Well, I think we're trying, I think I said this once or twice before, I think we're trying to come up with a paranormal theory of everything.
Yes.
Is basically the tack we've put ourselves on here at the Monster Lore Tour.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll see how many hundreds of episodes it takes us to get there. We're going to try.
42. Oh, we're already past 42. We should have solved it by 42.
It's a long road from hate to love, Moz.
Yeah, maybe 402. We'll get there.
There you go. Or
Yep.
4,200.
Yeah.
Oof. Oof.
Dang, dude.
We got some work to do.
Guess so.
So let's get on with the show then, huh?
Yep.
So today, we're going to be covering a few different, generally lesser known cryptoids, hence the name Cryptoidpalooza. But namely, we're going to be talking about the Glimmerman, Black Stick Man, and Mirrored Men. Note that is mirrored men, not mirror man. That's a totally different thing, topic for another day. It might seem random for these three to be covered in one episode, but, things are never as random as they may at first appear here at the Monster Lore Tour, so stick around to the end and you'll see how we tie all this together. But first off, let's look at the lore of the Glimmerman. So the term Glimmerman was actually first applied as a pejorative slang for gas company employees in Ireland during World War II in the post-war era.
I would have guessed the disco
Do you know
era.
that?
I would have said Greenwich Village disco era. Like Studio 54 kind of stuff.
Now, according to Wikipedia, the gas company's officials were empowered under their supply contract with their customers to enter premises to carry out their inspections. If they detected anyone using gas outside permitted hours, could disconnect the premises from the main supply. The inspectors were reputed to be particularly intrusive when carrying out their duties, and one can be, quote, rattled by the Glimmerman in the sense of being alarmed by their anticipated arrival. Monstrous type men, these, most serious sort of gas inspectors, they'd come in, just turn your gas off, leave you without any heat in the middle of winter, man. That's pretty monstrous, right?
Yeah, I remember Lilco back in the day, those bastards.
Yeah. But obviously these are not the Glimmermen we're looking for. I just thought that was an interesting thing that term had been applied before. Because the Glimmermen we're looking for, they're very hard to describe, which is actually, why they're here in the Cryptoidpalooza.
Yes.
As Maz taught us early on, the difference between cryptid and cryptoid.
Yeah, I borrowed this from someone, but cryptid is something, an animal that might exist. Cryptoid starts to get a little weirdy, magically shapeshiftery, changing.
Less definable.
Less definable, yeah.
Yeah, not sure how to even categorize them. Not sure what you saw.
Yeah, not necessarily a real biological creature, something with superpowers.
Yeah, there you go. But so the Glimmermen we're talking about appear like a heat shimmer over a summer desert highway, just a shimmering of air, a distortion of the light. Kind of like the Predator suit in the movies.
Ooh.
Oh, you see that?
There you
see
go.
That?
There you go.
The people who see them have a hard time saying what they saw, because all they saw was the glimmering of a human-like form. Humanoid, though, in all these cases. I'll let the experiencers explain it better as we go. For the sake of this episode, I have narrowed it down to a selection of encounter stories that highlight the characteristics of this cryptid that I would like to spotlight for our upcoming theories. Are you ready for the first Glimmerman encounter story, Moz?
Let's do it.
All right, good, because you're going to be reading it.
Oh, okay.
We're going to start with an experience story you can hear firsthand on the Monsters Among Us podcast, Season 13, Episode 15 to be exact. Monsters Among Us host Derek Hayes is an OG of the paranormal podcast realm. Definitely one of the inspirations for me in starting this podcast, actually. So let's start with some mad cujos for Mr. Derek Hayes of MAU Podcast, huh? Ah, damn boy! Thank you, Derek, and the Monsters Among Us team for all you guys do out there. But let's get into this story here. This story has a big lead-in the original version. I cut it down to the core experience part for the sake of time and relevance to what we're talking about. So if you want to hear the whole thing, jump back to the episode I was just mentioning there. But now, without further ado, would you please, Moz?
Scene, Bronx, New York, 6th floor apartment. Kid in the apartment, mom is in the shower, no one else is home. So I'm there watching TV, and then all of a sudden I start hearing a high-pitched ringing sound in my ears. And out of the corner of my eye, down the hallway near the bathroom door, I see two figures slowly materializing. They kind of look like they were being beamed down like in a Star Trek. So these things seem to be just like made out of glitter. I guess approximately 6-7 feet tall. My brother, He was 6'2", and I could definitely tell that they were taller than my brother. Weird thing, you could see the width and the height, but they just seemed to be like paper thin. So they seemed to be like two-dimensional. Now I saw them materialize in the hallway, and they are there. Now thinking back, you would think this had to be the most terrifying experience, especially for a kid of 6'7". For some reason, I wasn't scared. I was actually angry. In the back of my mind, how I thought of it was like, you're not supposed to be here. You can't be here. And I just felt very protective of my mom. Whatever these beings were, I got a sense that they were surprised that I could see them. I just went into full protection mode, knowing that my mom was in the bathroom taking a shower, unaware of any of this stuff that was going on. So I got up from the table where I was eating my TV dinner, and I ran into the hallway. And I just remember going into the middle of these two entities and just swinging and punching. It was as if punching through air. And all I remember is that it was like punching through glitter. It's sparkly air, but I wasn't connecting with anything. It's like my arms and my punches, my fists were going through them, and they just, within a few seconds, disappeared.
Thank you, Moz. So when the encounter first began, the initial symptom is said to be a ringing in the ears. This is something that could be caused by the sudden presence of an electrical field in the proximity.
Or Havana syndrome.
Yeah, or Havana syndrome. Then we have not one entity seeming to partially materialize in the hallway, but two entities seemingly fluxing through the folds of reality simultaneously with each other, right?
The tinsel twofer.
There you go. They're observed to be near 7 feet tall, taller than the observer's 6'2" brother for sure, but at the same time, nearly two-dimensional, if not actually two-dimensional. And they seem shocked when they realize they are being observed by the present human. Being observed seems to freak them out a bit. I'm going to make a note of that. Then when the present human attacks, notice this child did not react with fear, but with anger for their presence. They fled the scene and did not return. Not that the kid noticed anyway. This is a good starter story because these are all commonly reported characteristics of the Glimmerman.
It's also the same mistake Spock made in Galileo 7. But do go on.
What mistake is that?
Well, he thought the creatures would... he didn't realize they'd react emotionally. He thought they'd act logically and say, superior weapons, we're going to back off. And they acted with anger. Like, what are you doing here? This is our planet.
And after all that time hanging out with humans, that surprised him, huh?
Well, he did, other than that, that's for another... that's a side trail.
All right, fair enough.
We'll
see if we can squeeze it in.
Climb into the shuttlecraft and talk about that one later.
There you go. Let's get to the next story. This is an excerpt I found on a post on Reddit. The original poster's name was deleted, but the link to the post will still be in the show notes. It was originally posted on May 8th, 2024, so very recently as of recording, and it reads as follows. That's when I noticed a whoosh of wind, a rustling of leaves. And there it was, a nearly completely camouflaged, translucent figure, maybe 6 feet tall, just jogging down the same road I was walking on. I only noticed it because of how the colors behind it refracted off its translucent body. Slack-jawed, I watched it, and it completely ignored me. It looked exactly like a transparent glass man lightly jogging down the road. There was no noise, and it eventually just disappeared, or I lost track of it. I could never be sure. I didn't think with the surge of adrenaline pumping through my veins. I ran home with my backpack full of books. I unlocked the door to the house and slammed the door behind me, locking it promptly. I neglected to return to school that day and formulated the excuse that I came down with the flu to avoid getting a detention for truancy. I never saw it again. In this story, the shimmer is just passing on by, seemingly taking no real notice of its surroundings. Its fellow traveler, or walker, jogger, is, of course, somewhat disturbed by the vision of such a thing, but no direct threats were perceived. In the full version, it explains that the teller is actually a school-age student walking home from school in the middle of the day. So we have kids here seeing this stuff, which is interesting. So this is a child, obviously sober and whatnot, just doing the everyday routine, walking home for lunch basically. And suddenly a seemingly glassy fluid humanoid is just casually jogging by. It's pretty odd, wouldn't you say, Moss?
Yeah, and it does have that predator ring to it as far as these cloakied things.
Yeah.
So,
but there is that too, where a lot of times they don't even realize they're being perceived. Like they're not really totally in this space enough to even notice us.
But back to that other story, how do you? I guess maybe he was sensing it almost. But how does these glittery outline show surprise and intrigue, and like how do you glean all this from glitter basically?
I would imagine it's kind of a body language thing, because they are appearing as like humanoid, and like the hands go up, kind of jump back.
You could tell
like,
that they're startled and shocked.
They turn so you can't see them anymore.
Yeah, and then they're really thin.
That's what I imagine, is you just kind of catch their vibe through the you catch their vibe through their vibrations, the shimmery body language. Yeah. Good vibrations. Yeah, their vibrations go bad, and you can feel it.
Back to Kokomo.
Yeah. No. Why'd you make me do that? Anywho.
Anytime you good vibration me, I'm going to Kokomo you.
Let's go on to the next story, shall we?
God, is it about surfing?
You and your friggin' Kokomo, man. Not a real place. Stop it.
Next you'll tell me Brigadoon's not a real place.
I'd have to look that one up, honestly.
It's a real place every 200 years.
I have
there you confirmation on that.
Okay. Then we have this next story, which comes from longer ago, all the way back in the year 2000. This one comes from Reddit as well. Username JSTRotha0975. Link in the show notes. This raises another aspect of the investigation at hand. Do you want to take this one, Moz?
Back in 2000, I was in the Air Force as a security police augmentee. There was a shortage of security police, and I was made into a temporary security police officer at a base in the southwest U.S. I was patrolling the National Guard side of the base with another airman when we saw that the lights were on in the office building we had just passed moments before, and the lights were off. We went inside. There was a long hallway, and out of one of the rooms, a big invisible predator-like creature came out and started moving rapidly towards us.
What he means by predator-like creatures, the
shimmery.
Yeah.
Yep. The airman moved over and made himself flat against a wall as it passed him. This thing was coming right at me, and I froze. The airman yelled, "Get out of the way," and I did at the last second. I saw this thing move past me rapidly. There was a strong gust of wind behind him after he passed me. It just disappeared about 2 feet past me. Whenever I tell someone, they don't ever believe me. I'm glad that there are other people in this world that have seen something similar, and I'm not crazy.
There you go.
Validation.
Yes, exactly. Having someone there with you helps a lot.
Yeah.
A couple things in this story. First, I want to say how it reminded me of a time in the late 90s, actually, when I was working for a paper recycling company that specialized in confidential material destruction. Mm-hmm. One of those on-site shredding service kind of companies, and we did some military bases back in eastern Massachusetts where, they were on our client roster. So we would occasionally go in and collect, their paper out of their locked barrels and stuff, bring it in and shred it. But I remember one of these trips to a base, in this one building, it was definitely an R&D type building. I saw these posters on the wall, almost like advertising the next gen armor they were actually working on in this place. It's very distinctly featured body armor with cloaking capabilities.
Now, was it in the picture or in the words?
Both.
Okay.
The picture was like uncloaked kind of stuff, but like really funky looking bodysuit armor kind of stuff. And, soldier of the future kind of slogans on the posters. It was wild.
Like Starship Troopers kind of thing.
Yeah. But that was just a few years before This guy's talking about being in a military installation and seeing someone run by in a predator suit.
Oh yeah, that's what I got from that.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
But back to the first one where it's like the sun and the shimmering of the sun.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that could be something that your mind is playing tricks with you, because
Yeah.
you've got this fluctuating thing, and it kind of reminds me of, the gray man effect, where you kind of got your shadow projected into the snow behind you.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that could be happening with we talk about the mirage effect. You're looking
Sure.
at heat, waves of heat. You certainly can see some
Yeah, you
images
see the
through
static patterns and all that.
or you can see a figure. I think
I was going to get more into that in the skeptics portion later. So
that's fine.
as you say, let's put a pin in that.
Okay.
Because we will talk about that later.
Okay.
Something else, honestly, we're going to do some real-time podcasting right now.
Isn't that what we do?
This is not in my notes. I literally just realized this, that
that we're podcasting right now.
the wind in these stories. The kid walking home from school, and the jogger goes by. It's just a shimmery figure slowly jogging, but somehow it's making the wind
Correct.
rise. It's making the leaves rustle.
Yeah.
She feels the wind, or they feel the wind
Created by this
thing that's just gently
ethereal
jogging
entity.
by.
Right.
I didn't realize the oddity of that. And now in this one, they're inside. This thing's running by, and he literally feels
the wind. Yeah.
That's interesting.
So the energy needed to create, it maybe be beyond what someone running past you
So
would
here's
create.
a theory. Propellantless propulsion systems work on electrostatics that move air without burning anything or like any sort of propellant.
Mm-hmm.
What if this also works on electrostatics, which makes it create its own wind?
There you go. So it's back to the sweater.
I had to say that out loud so I can remember it for later, because I literally just came up with that. All right, so we've gotten the highlights of the Glimmerman characteristics, the tropes that come in, kind of all the stories you'll see. So before moving on, let's review this real quick. We have the ringing in the ears. Could be indicative of an electrical field, the electrostatic
5G.
thing we were just talking about.
Havana syndrome.
Or whatever it is that's making this thing phase into our reality, or whatever it may be.
Right.
Creating some kind of auditory effect, basically.
Taos hum.
Yeah. We have the seemingly two-dimensional appearance. These guys seemingly disappear when they turn sideways. They come and go from our perceptions.
You know what that
easily.
reminds me of? The hide behind. So if these things went back in time, anytime you see the hide behind, which is again an old shapeshifter trope, they seem to be able to duck behind saplings. They were really big, and then all of a sudden they're behind a sapling.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a two-dimensional thing. Yeah.
So maybe this is something.
The hide behind might just be a black stick man or something.
Yeah. Or something from
Who we're going to talk about
future
next.
weapons going back in time.
Ooh, time travelers. They're just there observing.
Yeah.
So they can't really be seen, which is kind of what these guys start playing into a bit too as we go. So let's move along. They sometimes appear in multiples. They're always reported as noticeably tall, and even close to and even more than 7 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
Experiencers generally report feeling no direct threat from the Glimmerman.
Yeah,
Some get freaked out just because, it's really weird just due to the strangeness
but they
of the
don't
event.
sense threat.
Just like, what the hell is that? But it's not like you
No,
run
I get
away
it.
screaming.
I agree that you could probably perceive as something wants to do you harm, and they're not perceiving that.
Right. It's the feel and the vibe, like you said,
Yep.
And like even the kid ran over, is like, get the hell out of here.
And they were like, okay.
Talk about not being scared.
Right.
Next, they often don't notice us noticing them. And when they do,
They're
it
surprised.
usually freaks them out.
Right. They're like,
to the point that they just spin back into 2D land or whatever, or go full on cloak again, or whatever it is they do to disappear from our perception. It's more scared of you than you are of it.
Well, they have their own prime directive.
It plays into that whole thing.
Yeah.
And it is not uncommon for these events to take place in secured areas, like inside people's homes and even inside secured military bases.
Right.
As we saw in these stories. I just wanted to point that out. We hadn't hit on that mark yet. So keep that list in mind, and we're going to dive into the lore of the Black Stick Men now. Black Stick Men are one of the newest additions to the paranormal zeitgeist, really, and are therefore not very well known or understood. It's not even certain how to categorize them, where they would be on the paranormal family tree, so to speak. Are they aliens, cryptid, interdimensional beings, time travelers? No one can really say, which is why they are also in this Cryptoid sandwich. They're going to be the meat in the Cryptoid sandwich in Cryptoidpalooza today.
They seem pretty thin.
Yeah, the meat's two-dimensional. It's not going to be much of a sandwich.
Yeah, I'm from New York. You can get away from that in Boston,
If you were a one-dimensional being, this would be an infinite sandwich.
Ooh.
But as a three-dimensional being, it's a zero sandwich.
Yeah. I like it.
Huh. Why does that make me sad?
Well...
Anywho, because I like sandwiches, and I just got a nothing sandwich.
But it has 0 calories.
We're feeding you a big nothing sandwich today, everybody. Welcome to it. Anywho.
They should be used to that by now.
Yeah, that's kind of all we serve here, isn't it? But when you go through all the information out there on these Black Stick Men and gather the clues from the available encounter stories people have been brave enough to share with the world, I think you can start to figure out what the nature of these things might actually be. Or at least start coming up with some theories that we will share later on. Since this is a rather unknown phenomenon in the paranormal realms, I'm going to start with some general background on the Black Stick Men, and then we'll get into the encounter stories. You will notice that some of these features are very similar to that of the Glimmerman. So, this, of course, is why we're here today. We're going to tie all this together.
Though.
So you ready? I'm going to kind of do this one a little bit backwards. I'm going to give you some background, and then we're going to do the encounter stories, okay? So first, they have been seen in all kinds of places all over the world, but they've mostly been spotted, or at least, mostly reported in North America and the UK. We also have sightings from South America in the mix in the episode here, so it is very widespread. They have a very stick figure appearance, just like the basic stick figures we all draw when we're kids, like a imperfect circle or ovalish shape for a head, stick thin torso and limbs, like straight up stick figure, like you're playing Hangman.
Oh yeah, that's a good rendition.
There you go. Usually said to be quite tall. Some experiencers say they saw black stick people as much as 32 feet tall, but that's like major outlier status. Most typically, they are reported to be in the range of about 7 to 10 feet tall, but have also been reported much shorter than that, but, also kind of outliers on that end. They may be able to change their size, but we'll talk about that later with some of the accounts and in the theories and whatnot. They appear two-dimensional. That sound familiar?
Yeah.
You will see them from the front, looking like the stick figure, but when they turn sideways, they disappear. And it is said they do not cast any shadows.
But they seem like shadow people.
They're kind of shadowy. They do get kind of confused with shadow people a lot.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started looking into this...
You thought shadow people.
Shadow people, black stick people were getting...
Mishmashed.
Grouped together. Yeah. But the shadow people, to me, is a totally different thing. It feels much more threatening, demonic. It's like a haunting...
Yes.
Something following you around, not necessarily for good.
Malevolent.
Yeah,
sure.
And the appearance is, like a foggy humanoid. Like it's actually a shadow. Out of the
corner of your eye.
Yeah, like a shadow in the shadow kind of thing.
Yeah.
This is literally a stick figure appearance.
Yeah.
Not threatening at all.
Yeah. Hey, everyone.
It doesn't haunt one place. They're typically just like kind of passing by when people see them. To me, it's they do get grouped together quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just because people don't know what to do with the Black Stick Men stories.
Right.
Again, shout out to Monsters Among Us, because they kind of pulled this out and realized that it's its own thing. Mm-hmm. Along with, this whole thing is, you can find a lot of stuff on all three of the things we're covering here on Monsters Among Us. Kind of led the way.
But so far, all these groupings, they've not been threatening, right? Or is the predator
correct? But not threatening.
Not threatening.
It's almost like they're there to observe us more than anything. Yeah. Is honestly the feeling you get so far.
Right.
So I just wanted to point that out as well. Mm-hmm. So next point, they seem to have some sort of vibration to them. these black stick men. Some theories say they are electrically charged. Okay, we got this again, which might be the cause of the vibration, but regardless of its cause, this vibration does seem to cause some negative responses in people who get too close to them, which leads us to the next point. They don't seem to be threatening. We were just talking about this. I got ahead of my notes. Mostly they just seem to be observing us. There you go. See, it's in my notes even. Sometimes even reacting in a shocked or fearful manner when they realize they are being observed by us humans, much like we saw with the Glimmerman. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to give you a excerpt from Villain's Wiki about this point. While there are no confirmed attacks on witnesses by black stick men, many have reported feelings of aggression and agitation from the encounter. It is plausible these creatures emit negative energy from them, or may feed on negative energy much like astral vampires. If a black stick man is discovered, it would create a movement that mesmerizes the eyewitness. So is it just me, or does that remind you of the Glimmerman story when the child reacted with anger and violence, right?
Reminds me of a lot of encounters at this point, though. It broadens the...
Remember the part about if you do see him, it may try to mesmerize you with its movements.
We come across that again in a lot of shapeshifters. They're trying to lead astray.
That's a particular point for this episode and tying it all together at the end as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's get into some encounter stories with these things, the straight up stories. I'm going to start with what as far as I can tell, is the earliest recorded black stick man encounter. This comes from upstate New York in the summer of 1964. It's at
they've come
60 years ago
to attend Woodstock.
This is how far ahead
they are early, and they're getting ready.
Oh, there you go. But this is in a collection of similar stories on Paranormal Stories YouTube page. Specific link will be in the show notes. Goes like this. A 10-year-old boy named Art and his friend were walking down a road in the woods near their neighborhood. It was around twilight when they spotted a strange, stick-like figure walking through the woods. Art says, "We saw a figure walking, long legs and arms, thin. And as it walked quickly, you could actually see waves of air around the body and limbs as it moved. I'm now 60, and I still see it in my mind. I know what I saw."
Well, little Linda Godfrey ending there.
There you go.
Or
I know
that
what I
podcast.
Saw. You know?
But it is odd that this energy around it is what is either making the wind move, or it's giving people this tinnitus thing.
And remember, we're talking about the black stick men now, not the
I know. I'm just saying,
how this is tying together.
Back. Yeah.
See how this is kind of all tying together already?
Yeah.
But this shimmering effect seems to be indicative of the electrical charge I was talking about that they're said to carry right there.
Yeah.
Creates a field around them that shimmers the air, much like what we were seeing with the Glimmerman.
Mm-hmm. I wonder what a Faraday cage would do if you're inside a Faraday cage that moves.
That's interesting. Would you see them differently? That's an interesting question. Yeah. I do want to theorize right at this point that the field is specifically electromagnetic in nature, connects them to the Glimmerman, but we'll get back to that. For now, I'm going to have Moz read us the next encounter story. This one took place in Surrey, BC. That's British Columbia, Canada, in the winter of 1996. If you would, Moz.
Two people were driving home to Surrey, British Columbia from a trip to the U.S. As they drove along Route 184 northbound around 10:30 p.m., their car suddenly died for no apparent reason. As the car rolled to a halt, the passenger looked up to see a group of stick figures, very tall, gliding across the road about 30 feet in front of the car. They glided from a clearing on the right side of the road to a clearing on the left side of the road. When the stick men disappeared back into the woods, the car started working again. Now, hold on.
Okay.
Before you go, I have to say, Surrey, British Columbia, how far is this from where Fox Mulder's car stopped when they were filming that? One of the first X-Files episode. That's where I go.
They did do most of their filming up in that area, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
I'm pretty sure that'd be impossible to figure out, or else I would say old business, but I don't
No, you just have to find the X on the road. We just have to drive around British Columbia, and we can hit some pubs.
I got a buddy up there.
There you go.
I don't think
we have a plan.
I don't think he has the time for that mission, though.
But I do.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
But a lot of questions raised in that account, though. So
Yeah, it's got a little UFO-y. It's got a little lost-timey thing going. It's got a little Fox Mulder thing, and it's the same area. But
the ones
more importantly thing is it brings back, it was a sighting of a stick figure.
Correct. The things I want to point out specifically here, the main takeaways I want to add to our list here. First, the gliding aspect. Their limbs weren't moving like they were walking or running. It was like a stick figure drawn on a piece of paper that someone just kind of held up the piece of paper and moved it across the road.
Yeah.
Like they were just like in position gliding across the road.
Right.
This to me actually speaks of interdimensionality, which we will get more into later in our theory section.
Well, the UFO scheme is, it's almost like the owls with, Clellan's work is a similar thing where they flash an owl before they abduct you.
Yeah. I mean, all of these things might just end up being interdimensional, honestly.
Yeah.
That goes into our theory of everything. But again, let's focus. The next main takeaway from the story, I want to say, is the electrical field. So is their field some sort of electromagnetics that interferes with the operation of electrical devices? Because it turned off their car in this one, like Mulder's. We do have upcoming encounters from more recent times with no mention of that, but, it does raise the question. Because there are some other ones where they're in traffic and the cars keep working. So, I don't know. Something to keep in mind, though. Anything else before the next encounter, Moz?
Let's encounter. Let's close encounter.
So this next one takes place in the same year as the last, 1996.
X-Files Season 4. No, sorry.
But this one...
It is 1996. I have to check my math.
This one is 7,000 miles away from Surrey, British Columbia, down in Curitiba, Brazil. So it's in Brazil.
We headed south quickly. This whole episode went south very quickly.
It reads, 2 brothers were driving near their home in Curitiba when they suddenly saw a strange, stick-like black figure, only 2 to 2.5 feet tall, running down the road straight at their car. They hit the brakes, and 3 other cars around them all stopped as well to stare at the weird little creature. So there's verification for you. Everybody's looking at it. The brothers got really freaked out as the thing got close to their car, and they drove away quickly. So they didn't stick around to really check it out.
That's what I'm doing.
Here we see the shorter end of the spectrum for these guys, like I was talking about, kind of an outlier in these stories, but it does raise the question of whether these may actually be biological reproducing entities, and that this may have been a black stick child.
Wow.
You got to at least put it on the board. You got to put it on the board.
You really went there. Okay. Black stick
we
child.
We want to look at all possible angles here, Moz, right?
Mm-hmm.
We will actually be seeing more on this point in the culminating encounter story for these guys. So this next story comes from a woman named Sandy in Charleston, South Carolina. It occurred in April of 2012. At that time, Sandy and her family owned a farm with about 4 acres of woods on either side and a river running through. At around 1 a.m., one warm April night, Sandy and her dog witnessed a most peculiar thing. Will you now read us the story from Sandy's point of view, if you would please, Moz?
I was looking out the door into the yard. All of a sudden I saw movement in the yard, and my dog even saw something. He made a light bark. He was just as confused as I was. He made only one little noise, and then was just as mesmerized as I was. In front of us were 3 tall black stick figures gliding steadily across the yard. I watched them and wanted to go outside, but I was just frozen with amazement, saying, "Am I really seeing this?" I watched them glide across the yard, and it lasted at least a good 15 seconds. Then they just vanished into the tree line and night. Sandy. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside just to the first step. I was a little nervous, but had to know what I saw. These tall black stick figures were darker than night. There was no light on in the yard or house where I was sitting. I could see them, no face, just black stick figures, long, skinny arms and fingers, and odd-shaped heads. They looked all the same height and all the same build, exactly alike, and glided so effortlessly across the yard.
And it should be noted that Sandy reported the height of these three identical creatures to be close to 8 feet tall.
Yeah.
So once again, we see the gliding effect rather than a walking or running motion. And now we have a further question raised with the three of them looking and moving exactly the same. Is this three different creatures, or is it one creature casting mirror image like my 8th level Dragonborn Sorcerer in our 5th edition D&D campaign?
Ooh.
What are your thoughts on that, Moz?
I'm thinking if you really don't know how to visit, a planet yet, and you're just trying to project an image, and you're like, well, we've kind of got this humanoid shape. Let's try to project that so it just looks like we're going through the yard.
Right,
it's like a very bad rendition of, hey, everyone, I'm just a dude walking through the yard. Well, no,
Like
what the hell is that supposed to be?
Right, like our perception and our reality is new to them, and they're just starting to
get like, we're just a dude walking down the street. No, you're not. What the hell are you?
Yeah.
You're doing it wrong.
All right, we are on the right track, because that's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. So let's get into this next one. This took place a year later in 2013, down here around our neck of the woods in the American Southwest, specifically southern Utah. So not too far from where we're at the moment. But this one is from vertigo22.com, link in the show notes, and it goes like this. It was February 2013. Me and some friends were dirt bike riding through southern Utah in the Warner Valley, which is about 300 miles from where we are. Mm-hmm. After about 2 or 3 hours of riding, we stopped for a break. As I was getting off my bike, I got an overwhelming sense that something was watching me. Later, all of my friends confirmed that they had felt this too. I started to look around, and that's when I noticed the figure, which was to my left, 80 to 100 feet from us, and looked almost 10 feet tall, and was like a school-drawn stick figure. But it never came into focus. It was blurred, and the air around it seemed like it was rippling. We were all looking at it by now, and I felt it looking at us. Then after about 30 to 40 seconds, it was just gone. Nothing was in its place, no change other than it being gone. To this day, we still don't know what we saw. Kind of a play on the I know what I saw.
Yeah,
but they don't know what they saw. They know they saw it, but they don't know what they saw.
Well, how do you even, everyone has the right reaction as if these are real accounts, because
Mm-hmm.
they're like, I don't know what I'm looking at. And we get a lot of that in this realm where it's not really tracking what they're tracking.
Yeah, but again, it's the stick figure with the rippling thing. We have the blurry rippling air pressing the electric field theory surrounding these things. Mm-hmm. Then the way this thing dips out, it just turns sideways, disappears, never to be glimpsed again.
But this one was blurrier, so it was more squatchy. It's more
maybe
Sasquatch-like.
It was a little more charged up, maybe.
Yeah.
But I mean, does this suggest some sort of teleportation or portal activity? Does it play into the two-dimensional theory that came up with the Glimmerman? The two-dimensional thing has come up a number of times.
Tesseract is where you're going with it.
Kinda, yeah. Interdimensionality is definitely a heavy point in this episode. But I am digressing again. We still have a ways to go before we get to the full-on theory section. Any more thoughts from you right now, Moz, before I make you read this next one?
Well, I just wonder if you don't, we always talk about people experience different things, and if you can't really perceive it, you're just, and this is going to sound silly, but you're only seeing the stick figure version. Someone else may actually see what they were going for.
Ah, that's interesting.
And you're like, oh, I see a were crocodile. And someone else is like, I only see a stick figure.
It's just a stick figure, yeah. That's interesting. The vibration, you can only get so much of it. You're only getting the basic outline.
Well, some people see a witch orb, and some people see a figure in the witch orb. It's a variation of that.
There you go. All right, well, this next one is a bit more mysterious than the others. It doesn't give a name of the experiencer. It doesn't give a location of the experience, and there is also no date of occurrence given. Kind of how I reported on the military base with the Predator-style cloaking points earlier. I didn't really give any names.
Or like Logan's episode.
But
he
this,
didn't know,
yeah, there you go. But this actually would normally land it on my kind of sketchy list.
Like Logan.
But when you, yeah. He's at the top of my kind of sketchy list. But when you consider what's being reported, it makes sense that the person reporting it would not want to be identified. So once I read it, I'm like, oh, yeah, I see why this guy doesn't want anybody to know who he is or when this was or whatever.
Yeah.
So do you want to read this one for us, please, Moz? This one is from...
You make it sound like I have a choice.
I believe this was from Reddit, too. All the links will be in the show notes.
One night I observed what I thought were two men coming out of a very lit-up factory side door. I had assumed they were on a smoke break and working third shift, maybe. The two became three, and then one, and they were like merging together, is the best way that I can describe it. When they turned to the side, they were paper thin. Their heads were oval, but more like an egg on its side. Later that night, believe it or not, I saw two more men come out of the side door of another building, but this one was dark and looked abandoned. Same thing, that they merged in and out of one another to where, if you were far away, you thought you were seeing shadows possibly. At any rate, they went back into the building, just like the ones I had seen earlier in the night that came out of the lit-up building. It's crazy because this building was active and had a chain fence around it. What in the world? I just don't even know. I had assumed I witnessed aliens, but that never seemed to be exactly it, and I came across the Black Stick Man legends. That's what I seen.
Now it's getting real here, Moz.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack with this one. So first, there's the merging in and out of each other, which calls back the question of multiple entities or one entity copying itself. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
Von Neumann probes.
Von Neumann. That's actually going to come up more in my next episode.
But it could be.
In a very weird way.
It's splitting. It's
Yeah, when they're coming together, and it also can play into the concept of interdimensionality again. Mm-hmm. It becomes the strongest thesis here as we go. But moving on. Second, he says when they turned sideways, they were paper thin.
Again. Yes.
This doesn't literally mean the same thing as disappearing altogether, as they were saying in the previous
accounts. They can still sense they're there. They just really...
Yeah. But it could be a lost in translation sort of thing, too. It plays into a number of theories depending on how you take it. So we'll get to that more later as well. But you see how it's all tying together. Third is the asymmetrical egg on its side shaped heads.
Yeah.
This is another thing that will play into the interdimensionality theory. So make a note of that. Fourth, the teller sort of tries to debunk himself with the second sighting where he says it may have just been shadows playing tricks on him. But I guess we'll note that one for the Richard Scully Muggle segment later.
There you go.
The skeptic side. And fifthly is the element that it took a long time for this story to get reported because the experiencer wasn't even sure what to report because there was no knowledge of such things in the zeitgeist. Like, he had nothing to compare it to, you know?
Yeah, when you read something similar and you go,
right.
Then all of a sudden it becomes real, and then you come forward.
Which is kind of how this whole thing got rolling with the Black Stick people, because experiencers have been having these encounters, these experiences for some time now, but they're just now realizing what it is because other people are telling, a story similar enough of, oh, that's what I saw.
Yeah.
But it's like, imagine being the first guy to see a Bigfoot or first guy to see a UFO.
You don't know what you're looking at.
You wouldn't even know how to tell people what you saw.
Well, that's why we talked about even with the Kushtaka is like they said it was an otter, but it really could have just been Bigfoot and they'd never seen one. So they say, well, it kind of had an ottery face, so it was an otter man.
Right.
Same idea. Like you're just trying to grasp what you know and connect it to what you saw.
Yeah, the closest thing in your own mind
to it. Yeah.
So with that, let's get to our culminating Black Stick people experience. For this one, we are jumping back on the timeline to 1978 in Simon, Kent, UK.
I knew we'd get to Greenwich Village in Studio 54. I knew it.
There you go. And to make it all the better, this story took place on October 31st, 1978. Ooh. That is correct. On Halloween.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool for this one. Just gives it that extra little bit of creep. So strap in. It's going to get a little bumpy, but it's going to be worth it. I will record a rather unpleasant experience which took place tonight. A group of about 10 of us were sitting chatting in the Luce Valley at about midnight. After about 45 minutes, Will leapt to his feet, slapping his head, saying there was a bee in his hair. He looked absolutely terrified. Both Dorothy and I saw the outline of a tall, thin figure wearing a hat dancing behind him. Will said later it was as if a terrifically loud buzzing was coming up through the top of his head. However, only Rachel heard any buzzing. We partially satisfied ourselves that it must have been a bee's nest, and so we moved a little distance away. As we moved away, Dorothy and I saw a ring outlined in the grass, which enclosed where we had been sitting. Eventually it started raining, so we headed for Rachel's house. As we left, I turned around and saw the same thin black figure walk across the opening between the trees to where we had been sitting. We had been sitting in Rachel's bedroom for a while when I looked at Will, who was reading, and saw an amorphous black blob drop out of his hair onto the bed. A few seconds later, a black shape started whizzing around. The main movement was from bottom left to top right as I was sitting, getting larger during the movement and inducing a great fright. About 4 people altogether saw this. Later, the girls slept in a room together. Apparently, Rachel and Molly saw the black blob in the curtains during the night. On first awakening, I saw the thin black figure silhouetted against the wardrobe doors. I must admit, I lost my calm last night and was bloody terrified by the whole thing. I have now moved away from the southeast, but I occasionally meet Will. Even 20 years later, he has been extremely unwilling to discuss the events of that night in any detail, as he still found the memories disturbing. During our last meeting, I gained a little more of his account. He was not aware of the thin figure which I saw behind him during the initial buzzing. Unprompted by me, he did recall the black blob falling out of his hair, which I thought I alone witnessed. However, he recalls it dropping onto the pages of the book he was reading rather than onto the bed, as I recalled. Will also recalls more of the girls' account of their night after retiring. Apparently, the blob had several times appeared near the curtains and moved them, while silhouetted against a bright light which appeared to come from outside, but did not correspond to any street lamp or likely car lights. So this takes it to a new level here, Maz. We see here the possible reproduction of the stick person. Did it lay an egg on Will's head? Or did the baby get itself in trouble grabbing onto the weird flesh man in the fairy ring?
No,
because it sounded like they were in kind of a fairy ring.
It's quite, yeah, the fairy ring is an interest. That's kind of what I thought, because the thing creates this, or there's a fairy ring, but then the thing walks towards where that had been.
Buzzing is the effect from the electric field.
Right.
Because the ones who were close enough felt the buzz.
Yeah, one of the 2 other people knew what he was talking about to a lesser extent.
And then the fact that the big one actually followed them home to seemingly retrieve the little one speaks to a protectiveness, right?
Wow.
Is this a parental thing? The mama bear coming for its cub?
Yeah.
Or is it dropped a probe on the guy's head and it's coming to recollect its hardware? Like, it could be so many things. Or maybe it's literally just a piece of itself. Because, it was bifurcating into triplets for that other guy. And, the way they glide around and create potential images of themselves, maybe.
Yeah, that's quite a story.
Whew. Yeah, right?
So, yeah, this gives us a little bit more of an idea of what might be going on with how these things form, how they reproduce, and even when they become multiples, this might be the first step.
Right.
But somehow it got separated because the person left. It left the field. Perhaps it can't operate that way anymore. Mm-hmm. So it rendered it inert as they walked away from the field. So this thing becomes essentially comatose in his hair. It's only when the thing comes back.
Oh, when it gets within a proper proximity.
Yeah, that it can now regenerate that piece of matter to come.
It's like the field theory.
Yeah.
We were talking about back in the UAP stuff.
Right. So it gets back in the
As
field.
long as the fields are close enough, they'll interact and things will work.
Yeah. It became an inert blob because it was separated from the field.
See, and that plays into the whole like alien tech sort of angle
Yeah.
on the theories here. There's a lot of theories you can get into on this.
That's a crazy story.
But before we get there again, this actually brings us to the other piece of bread on this cryptoid sandwich in the Cryptoidpalooza. Our third cryptoid of the day, the mirrored men. Mirrored men. Once again, we got to give a big shout out to the Monsters Among Us podcast for essentially discovering this phenomenon, actually, and building the catalog of experiences over the years.
Did the
kind
research,
of found that this was a thing, because once they got that first one,
categorized
more people
yeah.
started calling in, and all of a sudden it's like this is a common cryptoid encounter. Yeah. If you want the real full history of the mirrored men happenings, Monsters Among Us has definitely been collecting these stories for a while, like since season 1. They're in season 17.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And it's like throughout they keep getting more and more. So for our purposes, I am obviously just going to cherry pick some of the most relevant stories to tie all this together.
Okay. Make sure it's in the field.
Right. Keep it in the fairy ring.
Keep it in the fairy ring.
But let's start with
what happens in the fairy ring stays in the fairy ring.
Apparently not, because it followed them home.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Yep. But let's start with what seems to be the most widely known story of the mirrored men. This version is from the Humanoid Encounters subreddit. You might have heard this one before. Maz, you want to read it for us and see if it sounds familiar?
I was in the woods of Southern California. I was in the middle of a training session when I was told to stay off the road. Okay, cool, I said. About 2 a.m., me and my partner are moving to another spot when I spot 3 people walking along the road. I immediately told him to hold, and we moved into the shadows. What we saw was very unusual. The beings, or men, were the same exact height, moving at the same exact speed, with the same exact step and arm swing. I wasn't scared, but I was like, what in the F? I asked some others later, and a couple of guys said that they saw the same thing, and it was weird to them too. I asked for more details. Due to the nature of the job, I must be vague. It was in July. We were on a navigation night exercise, one of my favorites because they're high speed and thrilling. There's a group of us doing this evolution. We split off in twos. Woods at night can play tricks on your mind real easy, but my partner and I have laser-like focus, so we're not spooked by this. Hours go, and as we make our way to checkpoints, our last checkpoint was hard and very far. It took forever. We thought we were lost, so we had to recheck our map to see where we were at. We used the moon's light to gather our exact whereabouts. Well, best lighting is by the road, so we went by it.
And remember, they were told to stay off the road very specifically.
Stick to the path and beware of the moon. That's when I saw in the distance 3 things, people or whatever, walking on the road. I was like, F, instructors. I told my partner to dip off into the shadows so they couldn't see us. When they walked past us, it was trippy. All 3 same height, 6'7" or so, all unison, not a step out of place nor arm, and saying something in some foreign language. It was weird, and my thoughts were, these instructors are in need of civilization. These fools are tripping. I asked my nav partner, like, what the fuck, and shrugged it off. We finally made it to the last checkpoint. Others were there, and I asked about any tall instructors around. Everyone said no. 2 dudes walked up to me and said they saw some dudes walking perfectly together, and they dove into some bushes before they got near. They said it looked trippy too. I don't know, man. It was wild.
So, what do we see in this story that reflects what we know of the previously discussed cryptoids?
They move in a similar manner. They're the same height. They don't move. They glide. They seem to just be something projected into this world.
Let me go through my notes here. I do have some bullet points. 3 figures moving in exact unison, as though reflections or mirror images of each other. Mirrored men, see? Mm-hmm. Much like what we saw with the Black Stick Men.
Yeah.
Yeah. These figures cause a freak-out reaction in those who witness them. Not threatening, just kind of freaky.
Right.
See, weird but not scary like all the previous accounts we had for the other guys we've been talking about. The 3 figures were noticeably tall. specifically reported to be 6'7", puts him right in that range with the Glimmerman.
Extra tall, a little above human, not natural human size.
Yeah. It's not the 10-foot top end range we saw with the black stick men, but it puts him in range with most of the encounters we've seen for all these cryptoids we're talking about.
Yeah. And these are military trained, right? I mean, these are folks that are...
Yeah, and it brings up the question, we're going to have to see if Bone has mastered his mirror image spell, because 6'7", making a couple copies of himself.
I don't think that's a great idea.
Speaking
frankly.
in weird tongues.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Alex Bone theory. I might have to work on that. Anywho, but once again, these things were witnessed in a militarily secured area, with soldiers being the witnesses to this event. So this overlaps with our previous stuff, too, of them being in secured areas. Okay? So you see all the links. But what do we have that's new to add to the mix? The three mirrored men were heard talking. This is not something we've had. We haven't had audio from the Glimmerman or the Black Stickmen
at all.
They spoke
in buzzing. That's as far as it's gotten.
Right. But these guys were heard talking, and they spoke in what sounded like an alien language that the soldiers did not recognize.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Also, the soldiers were given direct orders to stay off the road.
And that's when it got weird.
Right about the same time that these mirrored men were witnessed.
Yep.
Does this suggest their superiors were aware of the mirrored men's presence? Was that a purposeful thing? Was that part of the exercise?
They were using the road, stay off the road.
Right. They were using one exercise to cover up the fact that they were doing this other exercise, to keep everyone out of the area and let these guys have the road. Okay. Now that that's established, for our next mirrored men piece, in the final encounter story before we jump into our theory section, put on your thinking head, Moz. We're going to go back to the beginning, both to the beginning of this episode and the beginning of the Mirrored Men mythos. We now go back to the Monsters Among Us podcast, like we started with for the first bit, all the way back in season 1, episode 3. Okay, this is the first Mirrored Man report, possibly ever. Season 1, episode 3. Timestamp 14 minutes 23 seconds. That's where the estimable Derek Hayes, official recipient of an MLT Mad Cujo's Award, did you know that? That's when he aired his first ever Mirrored Men story. The one that really started it all. It is a quintessential type Mirrored Men encounter that will cover the rest of the bases we need to cover about their characteristics and the characteristics of these encounters. We're going to give you a version of it here to add to the final details of today's investigation. This is about 20 to 21 years ago. I wasn't even quite a teenager. So here again we have like a prepubescent kid. Note that. My family had just moved from our old house to a brand new house we just built. The development itself was still very incomplete. There's a lot of dirt lots, basements already kind of dug out, construction stuff all over the place. Definitely a safe place for a young kid to go running around and be an idiot in. Mm-hmm. Anyway, this would have been after our first full year in the house. Must have been early summer, maybe late spring. I was dead asleep in my room. And suddenly, I had like this urge. I felt very compelled to wake up. Not like in a jumpy sort of way, like something startled me, but I was just very alert and very awake. This is a little bit after 2 a.m., and I also felt compelled to go walk over to one of my bedroom windows. So I walked over, and as I'm peering down looking at this corner, I see 3 figures walking away from my house. They're maybe 200 to 300 feet away, somewhere in that range, and kind of moving away from the house. So I'm watching them for a long moment, and I don't know why. Like I said, I just woke up and felt compelled to kind of go over to the window and take a peek out. And as I'm watching these figures, I notice that I can't glean any detail. I mean, there's even a street light kind of down the street a ways, but it's just like it's not enough light for me to make out exactly who or what was walking down the street. Blurry. blurry.
Splotchy.
But I could see more or less the dark outlines of people. But they were really strange as I was watching them. As I was watching them, I noticed that they were all moving in unison, perfectly synced together. They're sort of in like a not quite straight line, almost like an angled line walking down what would become a sidewalk, but it was just kind of like a dirt path at the time. And they were also very, very slow. Even though they were moving kind of constantly, they didn't seem like any of their movements were in any kind of hurry. They just sort of almost like glided down the street. So I'm watching them for a very long moment, and all three of them stop. And I don't know how to explain it. Even though I couldn't really make any detail, I could tell that they all sort of turned their heads to look at me.
Hello, hello, hello.
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 Hello. There's nothing else on the street. There's no cars. There's no other people walking around. Like I said, it was a new development. There wasn't much really out by where we lived at that point in time.
Yeah, they didn't even finish their monsters. It just looks like stick figures.
Oh, no. And all three of them at the same time, though, like I said, they moved so in unison. They craned their heads, at least as far as I could tell, to look at me. And like I said, they all moved in unison, so I could kind of see the movements happening at the same time. And we had that weird moment where I knew they were watching me, and they knew I was watching them. It was just kind of a weird, kind of tense moment. I didn't know what to do. I just kind of sat there and just kept staring. Then everything just kind of went blank. Not in like a pass out kind of way. I just felt like a very long blink. And when I opened my eyes again, I was still in the same position, kind of kneeling down looking out the window. My face was pressed up against the glass of the window, and instead of 2 a.m., it was just about 9 a.m. It would be just before 9 a.m. I had blinked and misplaced about 7 hours worth of time. It was daylight, obviously. There were no weird figures at the end of the street by the corner. Still really freaks me out, actually. I still remember that moment when they turned around and looked at me, knowing that I was watching them. Still have chills running down my spine.
There you go.
So once again, let's look at the overlapping characteristics and then the newly added features that we didn't see with the Glimmerman or Black Stick people.
I can tie this all together.
We're going to do that after this. We're going to get in the theories right after. Let me just kind of finish my notes here, and then we'll get into the theories. I'll let you go first.
All right.
So the similarities. Moving in unison, right? Gliding. Humanish, but the details are oddly obscured, like they got a blurry field around them.
Glimmery, shimmery, mirrory.
And you can feel when they're looking at you and vice versa.
They know when you've been bad and good, so be good for goodness sake.
Yeah. But we've seen all that before, right?
Santa.
Let's look at the new stuff. Lost time.
Yeah.
This isn't common with the Glimmermen or stick people.
And that time is a lot longer than most lost time.
That's a lot of time. And that is a common thing with the mirrored men. You lose like the night.
Yeah.
I have seen or heard an account or two that involved black stick people with lost time, but I couldn't actually find those. They are out there, but it's not a super common thing. It has been reported, but it's not super common. Seems a rarity, but it's very common with the mirrored men. I have not seen any lost time associated with the Glimmerman at all. So this may seem a little extraneous, but this is for our theory section again, okay? Yeah. So you don't see it with the Glimmermen. You see it a little bit with the black stick people. You see it all the time with the mirrored men, the lost time thing. Again, not scared to be observed. This is new. The Glimmerman, with the Glimmerman and the black stick man, we saw that it is common for them to freak out and run away or spin away into nothingness when they're observed, right? The mirrored men not only don't freak out when they see you seeing them, but it almost seems like they are putting themselves in your path to be observed purposefully. they called that kid to the window.
Right.
And looked at him.
Right. And then he's 7 hours later.
Right. This gives a more ominous tone.
So the mirror men are the ominous tone ones?
Mirrored men have the ominous tone with the lost time aspect.
Yeah. And just the general feel of the thing.
Right. And they kind of have like, almost seems like they have a bit of a mind control.
Yeah.
Where they like woke the kid up, called him to the window.
Right.
Looked at him, and then all of a sudden 7 hours gone.
Yeah.
So definitely a bit more of an ominous tone than the previous ones. And also could be used to build some more theories here in a minute. So I'm preparing to rest my case and start deliberating. But what say you, Moz? You see anything I've missed? Let's not get into the theory yet, but do you see anything I missed that I might want to point out before we get into it?
No, I think you scraped everything into the right buckets.
Okay. All right. So at this point, I feel confident in putting forth a hypothesis or two about how these cryptoids are somehow connected in nature. But are they of a natural, technological, or some other kind of origin? Mm-hmm. That's the question that lingers in my brain, because I have some conflicting theories on this whole thing. I know they're connected somehow, but how is what I can't figure out. I know it's there, but what is it? So first, I kind of broke it down into some different angles. So first, let's look at the technological angle, okay? What I'm seeing here, when I look at it from this angle...
Buzz, electromagnetic.
Yeah. Well, what I'm seeing is a technological evolution of military tech, beginning with the Glimmer suit, maybe just some sort of, personal field generator.
Predator.
Gets compared to the Predator suit from the movies. But I do notice some distinct meaningful differences. Namely, this suit seems to discorporate the wearer from normal space-time. If you remember the story with the kid in the apartment, he attacked the Glimmer and his punches hit nothing but air. It was like punching a rain of confetti. Or he said tinsel.
Hologrammy.
Right. So if that was a wearer of a suit, they were not corporeal as the Predator was in his cloaking field. Like when the Predator had his cloaking on,
you kicked him, yeah.
They could still shoot him.
Right.
You can't do that to a Glimmerman. Yeah. It's actually discorporated. It's no longer a solid physical thing.
It may never be.
Correct. So you're with me. That's good. Secondly, this suit seems to have full-on teleportive powers with the way they just fade in and out of our perception. Is this just the cloaking getting distorted for a moment, then returning to perfection? Where they are still present, but now truly hidden from our vision? Maybe, but I think it may be more complex than that as well. What if this field that cloaks them is actually a field around a personal, handheld, three-dimensional hypercube that allows the user to fold themselves into an infinite pocket of two-dimensional space within our three-dimensional universe and slide along a single two-dimensional axis therein and therefore transcend the physical bonds of our perceivable reality?
Dang, so this is kind of Doctor Who-y, but in a specific way.
Doctor Who-y.
But it's
Thank you for that.
But it's not entirely Doctor Who-y.
Not entirely.
Because, there's only so much that can be projected when, you're only partially there. You're not entirely there.
Right. Only the two-dimensional projection of you is
you're
actually
between
present.
Dimensions.
Yeah, like folded in between.
You're folded in between. Yeah.
You're like in the 2.5 dimension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Cool. All right. You're still with me. I like that. And that leads us to the black stick suit. See, that was the Glimmer suit.
Yeah.
Black stick suit. Lost the cool shimmer a bit, but perfected the folding of the two-dimensional space into a three-dimensional hypercube through which the wearer can travel. That's how they can, like, they're there, they're gone, they're there, they're gone. They're a little more solid in our reality, but they can still come and go like that.
Yeah.
There's
a fluctuating piece to this.
Yeah, this would actually go a long way to explaining the strange gliding movements, the multi-imaging appearance, and the strange stick figure appearance. Let me explain. If you pass a three-dimensional object through a two-dimensional space, you get what basically looks like a single layer of the object at a time. Okay? If you are passing a human-shaped object, like a human or something, through this dimensional passage, it would appear very much like a stick figure when centered on the plane.
Is this like an Einstein-Rosen? I mean, is it almost a singularity?
It's more like a flatland thing.
Okay.
If you've ever read that. The egg-shaped
Tom
head.
Friedman, not the one you're talking about. But go ahead.
Right. The egg-shaped head could be a cross-section of a skull, but not the whole thing, just a two-dimensional slice. See what I'm saying? Stick with me now. We're almost there.
Stick figure with you.
Stick with me. See what I did? If the wearer of the suit that allows you to slide around in two-dimensional space within our three-dimensional universe is projecting themselves into the three-dimensional space to directly observe us, it is most likely that they would appear to us as two-dimensional objects within our three-dimensional perceptions, and their height would vary based on how much of a cross-section of them is passing through our dimension at any given point on our timeline.
Cartoon portals.
Yeah, so like as they slide through, they get taller and shorter because there's more and less of them actually on that plane, you see?
Dang.
It's very flatlandy. But you're picking up what I'm putting down. Okay. Next evolution is the mirrored men. If this is a line of advancing tech, I postulate that the mirrored men are the next-gen progression of this tech. Instead of spinning down into two dimensions, they may be spinning up into four. The wearer, the wearer of the magic mirror suit, as I will now call it, projects themselves into the third dimension from the fourth, and we witness it as seeing multiple versions of the same thing simultaneously as it slides through.
So there's more data and there's more of a show.
Yeah, the fourth dimension would be time. So there's three of them. They're all like, yeah. I can't even like formulate the words for that part.
No, I get what you know. Right. So now it's moving through time and space.
This all also explains the moving in unison you see with all of these cryptoids when they appear in multiples. The difference here is the first two suits were useful really only for reconnaissance, intelligence gathering, general spy stuff, observation, that sort of thing. The magic mirror suit innovations gave it an offensive use. Now it can call you out, knock you out, and slide you right out of our space-time to where they can have their way with you, because they slide you into that fourth dimension where our time stops. They can put you back whatever time they want.
And then you're with Sir Laurence Olivier, and it's saying, is it safe? Is it safe? That's what happens. I know.
What do you think of that theory, though, Maz? The tech theory. That's the tech theory.
Yeah, yours, mine's not going to be that. You've had a lot of time to think about this. Yeah. I give you full mad cujos.
Oh, thank you.
Moved.
Can I give myself some mad cujos?
Down boy.
Thank you, Maz.
You're moving through this thing that brings it more. It's a militaristic, next gen military. Goes from we're going to make sure we can get into a secure area and see what happens, and then we're going to be able to. Now the interaction piece happens more and more,
right?
And the applications get more profound,
right?
Not where I'm going with it, because that's not the way I think.
Well, that's just one of the angles.
But the military piece of it is really interesting, because that's what it's, or alien,
yeah, which we'll get a little more into here, because my next theory is the natural origins theory, as opposed to the technological origins theory. And this is actually going to be my Ahu Guano theory of the week. Would you like to do yours before I get into my Ahu Guano, or would you like to do it after?
Well, go ahead, you go.
Ahu Guano theory of the week. Oh no, here it comes! Quick, to the batshit signal. My Ahu Guano theory is this. These cryptoids are not technological in origin, but are very much and literally related. They are naturally occurring, trans-dimensional beings that take time to palpate into a mature projection on our space-time. Like many life forms known to man, these unknown ones mature through multiple stages. Stage 1 is the glimmer stage, what we may refer to as the larval stage for this creature. It is just beginning to interact with three-dimensional space-time after hatching from its initially one-dimensional body from its two-dimensional hypercube cocoon. It doesn't have the ability to completely take form within the third dimension, as it still doesn't have its legs under it, again literally, on the two-dimensional plane, but it is starting to crawl and is able to kind of peek around the corners into these other levels of reality. As they mature, they gain a solid form, albeit still two-dimensional, but are able to master the passing through the veil between 2 and 3 dimensions. This is the stick stage, or pupil stage. Think of it as a trans-dimensional puberty period where they begin to master the next level of existence. The stick stage leads to a mastery of the third dimension, and when they finally pass through to the full adult stage of being for this cryptoidy creature, they transcend the third dimension and begin spinning up into the fourth, and maybe even ultimately higher dimensions. This is where they hit the mirror stage of being. And instead of spinning up from the lower first and second dimensions, they are actually now spinning back down at us from the fourth or even fifth or sixth dimension. This is why the mirror stage has no fear of us, and even instigates encounters to have their strange trans-dimensional ways with us. What do you think they want from us, Maz? What do you think they do to us while we're in that lost time?
Well, I mean, we mentioned psychic vampires today, and sometimes, things seem to want to suck off our energy and basically feed so that they can power their own.
Ooh, so they have to feed off our energy to recharge themselves for sliding around on their timeline.
The buzzing that people are hearing, and the upsetting piece of this. There's a psychic vampire piece to it.
It's actually psychic vampire. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
But yours, you got the whirlwind, you got the spiral, you almost got a fractally kind of spiral kind of thing happening where things are spinning and growing.
Fractally, yeah, like they're fractalizing themselves throughout the timeline.
Yeah, it is. It's not really ahuguanoy. It's a really interesting hypothesis.
Yeah,
I would say.
Thank you. I thought it was crazy as all hell. That's why it's the ahuguano theory.
Well, you've got something that is gradually, even though it's not appearing to be that much different from a visual standpoint, it seems to have more and more interactivity and capabilities.
It does seem
if it's one thing.
They have all these characteristics in common. That there does seem to be kind of this progression from one to the next, doesn't there?
Yeah. Yes.
The fields around them,
which
and
again,
multiple images,
but military grade testing or alien grade testing do fall into that, and it may not be interdimensional. Like, this is the part of it that's the ahuguano part. This may be just tech getting more sophisticated.
That's why the tech was not the ahuguano part, because I honestly think that's more believable.
Yeah,
than the natural aspect.
Yes. Yeah.
But I mean the natural aspect too. If it is a natural creature, you look back at that last Black Stickman when we did, where it kind of laid the egg on the guy's head, as I said.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's actually watching maybe the birth of something right there, which is interesting. But I do lean more towards the tech side than the natural side myself. But we're not to the believability scale yet, so let's not do that. My next thing is the skeptics review. Do you want to put forth any more theories of your own before we get into the skeptic side here, Moss?
Well, mine is going to be really quick, and I was going to try to make this joke about an hour ago, but you stopped me. But now it's going to become my ahuguano theory, and it's only 2 words.
Oh boy.
Synchronized glimmers.
Gotcha.
It was just
is that a new Olympic event?
Maybe. But I was going to say that. You said, no, wait for the theories. And there you have it.
Synchronized glimmers.
It's become my ahuguano, because it was relegated later. I have one other, though, I mentioned this earlier. It's kind of what I think about and again, it always has to do with the books that you just read. But Mike Clelland's Owl Synchronicity and Beer, I think it's called that, but
Owl synchronicity and beer?
No, it's owls, messengers, owls, and synchronicity. Or aliens, owls, and synchronicity.
Okay.
So, but basically, a lot of that happens in threes. A lot of that has to be this projected image of owls before an abduction. This almost seems like there's threes that happen.
Yeah.
There seems like sometimes there's these three black stick figures, and then there is a lost time component to some of this.
Yep.
In particular, the mirrored men seem to be more of this.
Almost all of those have lost time.
Right. And those seem more linked to this event that you see that's just what is projected into your brain by whatever is doing this. And it's just, then there's lost time. There's an alien abduction scenario, and it's just what you remember when you wake up.
Right.
Which is similar to what Cleland was getting.
And I did just realize a distinction that should be made. The lost time, if you look them in the eye, that's the difference. Like the soldiers in the woods where they hid and the guys never, like, they didn't actually interact with them directly. They just watched them walk by. Mm-hmm. No lost time. Any encounter with the mirrored men where you make eye contact, like the kid in the window,
right?
There's a lot of those. Mm-hmm. Those all result in some sort of like lost time or like mesmerization,
right?
Kind of thing. Maybe not entirely lost time, like they just, but time like slides by. Like they don't really lose consciousness all the time and stuff. But how did 3 hours just go by? It felt like 5 minutes kind of stuff. Or you have stuff like we saw here where literally 7 hours just disappeared. But when you make eye contact with the mirrored men, you will suffer lost time.
Well, isn't that interesting too with the mirror component to it? If you actually look directly through a glass darkly, if you're looking directly at a mirror, that's a moment where you're actually seeing a reflection of yourself, and there is some energy and something's going on between the two dimensions, creatures, whatever you might be looking at. That interplay happens when you make that connection.
Right.
Instead of just looking at it like at an angle and something was just, if you actually stare directly at it, something all of a sudden's happening.
Yeah. It's that connection, it's like closing the circuit.
You're closing the circuit so that something's actually, between dimensions, you're actually making that kind of, that exchange is occurring.
Right.
I have the book right here. Let me grab it so I get this right. The Messengers, Owl Synchronicity, and the UFO Abductee is the actual name of the book. I had to reach a few feet behind me to bring that out.
All right. Thank you for that.
Yep.
So we're ready for the Skeptics Review then?
Let's do it.
Sir Richard Scully Muggle Skeptics Review.
You're full of crap, and that's the nicest thing that I can say.
All right, so it's kind of too easy to put off stories like these if you choose not to believe them. People's eyes play tricks on them all the time, every day. It's what the skeptics would say. The glimmer was just a trick of the light. Stick people were just weird shadows in the night, and you just didn't look at the mirrored men right. Yeah. It's like poetry.
In motion.
And then you have, like specific things, like the visual snow syndrome. You ever hear of visual snow syndrome? People can actually see static.
Pattern, yeah. It's okay. So yeah, you're seeing this static in the background because it's messing with your visual perception.
And at least on the Glimmerman front, stuff like that can very much explain that. Like you
like
just
the
see
heat
the sparklies.
The heat waves. The mirage started that way.
And there is a thing that can happen to people visually where they just start seeing that. Yeah,
I think of it, the gray man and basically the effect that happens when your shadow's projected into the snow behind you.
Yeah, there you go. And the Black Stick Men said not to ever cast shadows. What if they are a shadow?
Yeah.
It's just a trick of a shadow where it looks like it's standing up even though it's really not. It's actually laying down, but your angle or whatever trick of the light makes it look like it's something standing up.
Right.
So that there are plenty of ways for the skeptics to kind of shoot this down. Mm-hmm. But, the Glimmerman, particularly, there's a lot of that out there.
Mm-hmm.
Enough that they made a movie from it. Not that that makes it any more real or whatever in itself, but just it's a common enough thing that, it's in the mainstream now. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the Black Stick Men, the Mirrored Men are like I said, relatively new discoveries on the paranormal front.
Yeah, I mean, all the Reddit, just so you know, the Reddit stuff, I'm going back into time and I'm going to get there. Yeah. But all of it really was new to me, and it is fascinating.
That's why I wanted to cover it early, because it is new.
Yeah.
There are a couple of podcasts out there that have dived into it very extensively. Monsters Among Us in particular, because they were the ones that really discovered it to begin with.
As a category.
But, endless stories on the Mirrored Men are almost like every third episode he's got a new Mirrored Men story. It's become so common.
But again, how we perceive things becomes the trope. As soon as a lot of people understand that this is a thing, then that's the way it ends up being perceived. When we have a similar experience, then that's what we end up seeing, because if we're all in the Philippines, we tend to see an aswang. If we're all in the Arctic,
if you're a Tlingit, you see an otter.
Yeah, if you're a Tlingit, you see an otter.
Good point.
Or if if you're Simon Pegg and you see a mongoose,
Right. But another thing that skeptics might bring up here, and this isn't down your alley as a master of psychology.
No, masters in psychology, not master of psychology.
Masters
I like
in psychology.
Master of psychology.
There you go.
Yeah, this is I can upgrade.
You can say that, right?
I can upgrade.
It's
I'm
just
in
a
the
better
fourth
way.
dimension black stick figure.
There you go. There you go.
Psychomantium.
Schizophrenia.
Yes.
Is something that is often brought up in the Glimmerman situations and things like that, when people are seeing things like this and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Richard Scullymuggle might actually look to solve this problem with his prescription pad.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on that? That maybe it's just some kind of mental disorder that could cause people to see these things? I mean, the Glimmerman is written off as that a lot. I don't know how much it would apply to things like the Black Stick in the mirrored people.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Moz?
Well, the frequency of this is about 1% of the population suffers from schizophrenia, and it's certainly part of what we're seeing, but I think it's a much smaller part than because most of these folks are not diagnosed with mental illness. They are doing their thing. There's multiple witnesses. The schizophrenia part is a very small part of the weirdness, but those tales do come through, and they do end up into the lore for sure. But again, one of these days, one of the side trails is going to be the breakdown of the yogi and the shaman and someone suffering from schizophrenia, and kind of Roger Walsh did this in a table, and I'm trying to expand on that table before I present it, but there's a lot of commonalities between these things. There's a lot of differences, and the difference usually between like the shaman and the person suffering from schizophrenia is control. Like the shaman is going into something and controlling it, and the other person is just kind of happening to. And what they're seeing, I don't want to discredit even some of the unfortunately bad symptoms, negative symptoms that they're dealing with. But at the same time, I don't think this filters into our stories from Coast to Coast AM as much as we might think. I think that's a part of it.
Good to hear, actually.
But I don't think it's a big part of it.
A lot smaller than your typical skeptic would make it.
Yeah, because a lot of folks, and Carl Sagan covers this in Demon Haunted World as well. A lot of folks who don't have mental health problems have so many experiences that would be considered. Right. And one of the examples he gave, and I would have to, off the top of my head, obviously, I'd have to put in the show notes. It's an old business moment, but he used an example of a study that kind of showed that dreams may be, one of the theories is dreams are always happening, and at different times they kind of peak out. Just like the example I would give, I don't think he did this, but you see the moon during the day. It's always there, but sometimes these kind of peak out. And now something where you're getting quiet, and all of a sudden a dream is kind of bursting forth a little bit, but that might not have at another time. It's always there, now it's kind of piercing through the veil a little bit.
So, in other words, it's more like they're not actually sliding into our dimension so much as we are
tuning into
perceiving
theirs. Yeah, and that's like salvia. We talked about when you take different drugs.
Yeah,
you
live a whole life
tuning into this frequency, and all of a sudden you're tuning into that frequency, and that's why they're surprised they can see you, because a lot of times you're not, but all of a sudden you're in the right moment to be aware. The moon's peeking through the blue sky, and you're like, hey, what are you doing here? And they're like, whoa.
They freak out when they see us, because to them we're like a ghost.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, it's a ghost.
Yeah. Or I think it is more the observation piece of it, and I think, but you're right. It could be both ways, that this is, you're peeking into their world, they're peeking into yours. It's a portally moment.
Nice.
Portally moments.
I don't know how we got there from doing a skeptic's review, but that was very well done, Moz. Thank you.
Right, yep.
I love how we just forget about the skeptics and move on.
Yeah. I mentioned Carl Sagan, Demon Hunter World. That was actually
good job.
It was actually him being a skeptic, that whole book.
That tied it up very well for us here. Thank you, Moz. So and that brings us into our Scully Mulder believability scale.
They feel your methods, your theories are
spooky. Do you think I'm spooky?
Wait, why am I Scully?
So let me give you the categories real quick, okay? We're going to do a little bit of categorization for our believability here.
Yep.
4 points. So 1, are these things real, at least phenomenologically? These events actually happening. 2nd, are they related? 3rd, are they tech? Or 4, are they organic? Okay? So first, is this phenomenon real? Moz, 1 to 10.
It's so hard for me to do these.
I'm stumping him. He doesn't like the ratings.
Well, no, you broke it down nicely. It doesn't change the fact that it's tough for me to kind of wrap my head around some of that stuff.
Yeah.
So
I'm giving it a 9.
Okay.
On the actual, something's happening. People are actually seeing this stuff.
Well, phenomenologically, I'm with you most of the time. That's why we discuss this stuff. That's why we have a podcast. People are experiencing something.
There you go.
And I'm in disagreement.
So very much believed on that one.
Yeah.
So now get into the heart of the episode. Are these cryptoids related? Is there actually this connection I'm trying to build between the glimmer stick and mirror?
You made a strong case that these are very, again, though, we seem, whenever we look at something, it seems to get herded towards one bucket. So
right.
This isn't uncommon, but you did a good job scraping the stuff into a bucket. So I'll give you a high score.
I had to create new buckets.
Yeah.
For this episode.
Yeah, and those things,
So how good did I do 1 to 10?
On that, as far as related phenomenon,
I'd say
7.5.
Nice. I had a 7, so we're both spot on there.
There you go.
7's pretty good, I would say.
Yeah.
So, and then it comes down to the either or. How likely is it to be a tech thing? How likely is it to be an organic thing?
Wow.
If you're going to assume that, yes, this is a real thing, okay? We gave it a 7 on related, but we were both like 9.
I think the tech is more believable because it sounds like next gen military, like I said the first time, that we're always 20 years ahead, and this is the kind of cloaking stuff that they have. We read these studies that suggest you can start to do this. So military is experimenting with it. It's camouflage 2.0. And I definitely think that is the more likely scenario. But then you get these stories of blobs and things, and it does seem so alien and portally and strange.
Well, I won't make you put an exact number on it, but I'm totally with you where I won't put an exact number on it either. but the tech does seem much more likely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to completely write off the organic, natural occurring thing. But yeah, if I had to split 10 points between them, it would be like a 7 for the tech and 3 for the organic kind of thing. If not 8 and 2.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Much more likely to be tech.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now that we figured that out, that brings us to the PA Stay What the Hell segment of our episode here, the closing segment, Wolfman Puck's Cryptid Culinary Corner.
Your entree, sir. Oh, smells good.
There you go.
So this one was a conundrum for me, Moz. Not really sure how to even do this for this one, because our basket ingredient is going to be a black stick person.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going with the theory that these are biological organisms, just
Yes,
for the sake of this segment. Because, if it's tech, it's
right.
What are you doing? So we're going to assume a biological origin here.
Mm-hmm.
So then, they can at least be eaten. My problem here is I can't wrap my head around how you can prepare and eat a 2-dimensional being as a 3-dimensional creature.
I know how.
Good, because here's what my next paragraph in my note says. If you can help me out with your crazy cryptozoological genius and let me know how that might work, I will gladly hand you this week's trophy for Wolfman Pucks. But if you fail me, Moz, I'm going to feed you to the mirrored men as they shred your soul into infinite 3-dimensional bits inside their 5-dimensional tesseract.
No pressure there.
No pressure. Go.
So just so you know, I didn't do my homework this time.
Oh, I know. You didn't even know you had the script until I showed up to record today.
Correct. So I did have the script.
You just hadn't actually bothered with it.
No, it's not true. I asked you what we were doing, and we had a miscommunication.
Communication
breakdown. It's always the same.
Yeah.
No, I think I'm going to glimmer some blackened stick figure, and just glimmer it. Just leave it in there and let it saute. Put in a lot of good stuff. And then when we actually take that slop out and serve it to people, it can be some kind of special dietary thing because there's 0 calories. So all these people are going to be like, wow, I can eat this and maintain my weight and lose weight. It's a gimmick.
So you can consume an infinite amount of the 2-dimensional creature, and it will take up 0 space in your 3-dimensional body. So you can literally just sit there and eat for infinity.
So if it tastes good, we can really make a lot of money.
Yep, you win. That did not disappoint. Thank you very much, Moz. That was brilliant. I now can actually visualize eating a 2-dimensional creature.
Wow.
Thank you for that help. I knew the Cliff Clavin of cryptozoology would help me out with that. And on that note, I'm wrapping this sucker up. Is there anything you want to add or subvert before we go, Moz?
No, nice. I didn't know how you're going to tie us together, and I'm pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. It actually... The theory came before the write-up. I saw these 3 things,
the only
and I'm
reason
like,
I say
these are all connected. And then I wrote the episode. It's backwards from how it usually works.
That is the reason I'm pleasantly surprised, is you had no idea how these tied in. You just knew it did.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, well, why don't you wait until you figure it out? And you're like, no,
I figured it out.
Yeah. No, I know, but you didn't know for a long time.
True.
And you forged ahead anyway. That's the only reason I said that.
Yeah. Yeah. And hence Cryptoidpalooza.
There you go.
Yeah. Pretty happy with it, I got to say. If you guys have any further theories or thoughts on this whole thing, please feel free to email us at monsterloretor@gmail.com. We can read your comments on the air, discuss them on the podcast. What else do I normally talk about? Hit the little happy fun buttons, like, subscribe, share, tell all your weirdo friends about us because they might like us too. The weirder the better, I guess, around here. Patreon is only $1 a month to get early access to all the episodes and simultaneously release of the side trails. That is patreon.com/monsterloretor. Guess that's it. Anything else?
What about a Tesseract of ribs?
Now I'm hungry. Thank you, Moz. We're going to go get some lunch. We'll be back for the side trail in a little bit. Till next time, have a good one, listener.
Curitiba, Jamaica. Ooh, I wanna
Don't
take
do it.
ya.
Don't you Kokomo me.
You've been Kokomo'd.